Okay, guys, so this is going to be a little bit of a different build log than I normally do because I did not actually film a video for this. And I wanted to show off the actual build log photos that I did for my ecto containment unit from the Ghostbusters or Glitchbusters build that Thomas Rice, Rodimus 13, and myself did. And because, of course, this was a secret build, I was documenting but trying not to share, at least not with Rodimus. I was building it in secret and showing it off to other people instead of him. So I'm going to go through this kind of pictures by pictures and explain more or less what I did. That's kind of how a build log goes. So, all right. First and foremost, I did not take enough pictures at the beginning because I was just sort of going through it. Okay, so right here at the beginning, we started out with me pulling out my old school action bases. Now, these were way back in the day, my original base for my reviews. It was actually kind of funny, and I did save them up over the years. Now, of course, you'll see here that it does have some random colors of metallic spray paint on it, and that's actually from trying out the Gundam Marker airbrush system a couple times. And yeah, and that was just how it is. But at this point, I was just trying to figure out exactly how I was going to position things. So I actually got them kind of in a vertical upright position here. And you can see sort of tucked off right behind it was the beginning of the containment unit itself, right there to the left of the chopper, but behind the gray pieces. And also off to the left, you can see the red paint that I went and got just for this. And unfortunately, off the top of my head, I can't remember which paint that is. I will include a picture of it right after this. But my basic tools that I used for this was a knife, all of my sanding stuff, the chopper, a metal straight edge of some sort, whether it is that bottle opener there in the background, or what else did I use? Oh, I used the caliper. So I have an electronic caliper, which actually is perfect for creating the pieces that you need. And then, of course, to attach things together, we have both the Tamiya extra thin cement and then even some sprue goo, which is just leftover cuts of plastic thrown off into extra thin cement. So if you actually want to do that, you can do that. So this was actually, I believe, day 2, because I actually had gone to get the paint and supplies and stuff like that. So at this point I had the spray paint, another jar of glue because I was already out, and I picked up the different styrene sheets, including the brick and the diamond plate. So moving on real quick here, we have the next thing, which is actually the kind of base build that I managed to do in the first day for the containment unit. So I started with just the back piece, kind of just cut it out to the right size and just went from there. And then actually building it up three-dimensionally, basically learning to build a box, is the kind of beginning of scratch building. So you want to get good at cutting perfectly square edges, things like that, and making sure that you can actually build up a box system. I got practice with this by building the trap actually for the Ghostbuster guy. But you can see here I've got all the front panels, such as the little switch panel up in the left that has, I guess they're supposed to be knobs, and then what is supposed to be kind of a meter readout. And then next to that is, of course, the panel with the buttons that I infamously near the end actually got the lighting order backwards. I actually have the extra panel up front for the door, combined with a little panel and the handle. Now the handle is actually spaced up, so it's not sitting flat, so it actually has a little dimensionality to it. There's just a tiny little cut-off piece of runner sitting behind it to actually add that gap. That's why it has a little bit more shadow and sits higher, a bit more proud than the actual little border around it, since it's supposed to look like a little sunken type handle. I forgot the actual term for that. Now, actually, for creating that little ring effect there, cutting a hole out of styrene is actually a little easier than you would believe. Basically, you want to trace the outline of the hole you want. So, get your edges marked out. Actually score them. If you have a straight edge, it makes life so much easier. So score all your outside edges, and then from there, actually connect the edges across through using either a star or an X, however you want to call it. Connect the corners diagonally across, and then just kind of wiggle it until you can pop out the middle bits. I actually poked the knife through the center to give it a little bit more flexibility. With a piece that small, I didn't want to break the outside edges. And then I did round them over using my files and or sandpaper so that it didn't have pointy, angular corners. Now for the bottom section that is actually curved down at the very base down there, that is actually, I kind of already had the length determined by the back section there. So I just had to make sure that I traced, what ended up being a curved section for each side, put those together in place, and then just kind of had a piece of styrene sheet over it, gluing the edges down, basically making the two sides of the box. And then using my little plastic clamps, actually held that in place, and then scoring it near the edge. You can see the really roughness there. This was after I sanded it once, so scoring it so that it would have a bit more flex to it, then finding out that that just caused it to kind of break in a few places. But then I eventually got the curve I needed, and then I filled it in with sprue goo and even a little bit of super glue over time, and then just kept sanding it until I got it more or less curved on the surface. Now the only thing that I didn't get very well was the edges actually square or plumb straight up and down. So that the left side of the box is actually kinked ever so slightly. It's enough to notice, but I mean, if you're looking at it straight on, you're really not going to see it. So finally moving on to the next one, it is of course going back to the base. So originally I had the edges all diagonal still, and I said, I'm not really going to make that work too well. So grabbed my handy dandy new cordless Dremel tool and get a big cutoff wheel and cut everybody up straight and edgy, except for the fact that it didn't go as well as I thought. If you look at the right corner near where it is all kind of fused together, I took out a good chunk right there. So this process took a couple goes to get sanded as smooth as possible, and still by the time I glued the vertical and horizontal pieces on it, it was still not perfect. Because actually these little action bases are all held together. A couple are held together by the clips, and then most are actually held together by super glue. And so they're not perfectly spaced or anything. So it's just doing what I can do. Just time to clear it up. And of course you can see little red clampy there that I use to hold stuff together. I bought even more of those the other day. Now, unfortunately, my battery for my cordless died halfway through cutting this thing, so I pulled out the corded one. You see it there off to the left, and that made really short work of this thing. However, the corded, you lose a little bit of control because you have to be wary of where the cord is. The cordless one is a lot of fun, but the battery does not last long, and that particular version only has 2 speeds. But it's definitely a tool worth getting. I got mine for like 25 bucks at Walmart. Now, moving on to the kind of foot plate, the concrete on the ground, so to speak. So this is just a sheet of styrene. I don't remember exactly which size it is. It's not super thick, so I think it's something in the 030, 020, somewhere in there. And it's a little bit thinner, but still sturdy enough. Now this was me just trying to draw out the patches or the holes in the concrete. So this is going to be a concrete floor with some holes in it because I wanted to be able to expose the kind of inner workings of the base, being that this is in the GBN world and stuff like that. So you would see through the seams sometimes. And just off to the right there, you can see my calipers just kind of sitting there. And once again, that is a valuable tool for scratch building, especially because it has those nice sharp points on there. So you can actually score your styrene at the exact length you need. Kind of, if you're careful with it, you can get straight lines for scoring and breaking, because most of what you do with styrene is not about cutting. It's about snapping. It's about scoring and breaking, which is actually what I did to make these holes work for the most part. Now, before that goes on, I actually did give this thing a couple base coats, both with some, I think it was the Navy Sea Gray 2, and then just a couple bursts of some light gunmetal, just so it had multiple grays and metallics all over it. You weren't going to see a lot of it, but I knew where the holes roughly were going to be, so I wanted to mix up the finish a little, so nothing crazy. And there's another shot of that. Just so you can see that the edges are still really rough, but they're kind of going to get covered, so it is what it is. And then I'm using this foam board down there just as a good cutting base because I don't want to cut or damage my table. And I did end up cutting my sheet that is laying on it. Now, here is actually the piece cut out. And most of those holes, like I said, actually traced the really ragged edges and then scored across in a diagonal pattern until I could pop out the bits. And then I went through with a file and roughed up the edges so that it looks like chipping and stuff like that. And you can see that I actually scored the lines in between the concrete. You can see some traced cracks in there, scored with a blade after being drawn on with pencil. And then I also battered it a little bit. I hit it with a few things. You can see dings and dents and stuff in it, even using drill tips, the point of a knife, what else did I hit it with? I hit it with a few things, just to really kind of age it up and look like it was a damaged floor, which, you know, worked out pretty well. Now this is actually stuck to the back of this box that I was using to paint my flat surfaces. All right, so moving on to the brick wall. So this is actually a brick wall styrene. You can totally buy this. It's not by the same, was it Evergreen? It's not by them. I don't remember what the brand was. It's a different size sheet. So I traced the edges and trimmed off, I don't even know which side it is to look at here, and so that it would fit. And then I determined roughly how big it was going to be in the location of the containment unit, and you can see right down the middle where it was meant to be offset, a little bit crooked, like, because, you know, Ghostbusters they're good, but they also suck sometimes. So it's like kind of a half-assed job, realistically. And you can see the pen marks where I traced out the actual design. And then this actually took a while. Most of this was actually free cutting all of it. And it took me probably a good 30-45 minutes just to cut out all these holes. You can still see some of the pen marks even on the finished product that didn't get any coverage otherwise and didn't get cleaned up. All right, so this was skipping ahead, even though I thought I took pictures along the way for this, or even took a video or two, but my phone was a bit wonky. So with the concrete base now actually painted and weathered up and stuff like that, this is me actually trying to glue it. The clamp is trying to hold down a really wonky corner there. Now you can see that even though this picture kind of sucks, it still reflects that, you know, the concrete is there. Now I did use Vallejo concrete paint, and I was actually trying to use the Gundam marker airbrush system, and I bought a loadable empty marker for that purpose. Unfortunately, I think the paint was too thick to really be effective, so it was kind of blowing out in globs, not as a fine mist. So ultimately what I ended up using that system for was actually just globbing the paint onto the plastic and then using the air to push it around a little bit. And I did brush on a couple base coats just for the heck of it, and it oddly enough ended up kind of pooling and getting some weird ridges and even some porous holes and stuff like that ended up making it look more like real concrete by the end. And then it is just weathered up with the Tamiya weathering system, whether it's the rust or the soot. I basically used up almost all of my soot while doing these couple projects here, and a lot of the rust actually. But like I said, this is the gluing stage, gluing the concrete down. Now we move on to, here's the wall. You can see how it's going to fit on the wall itself. Obviously, I'm not going to attach it just yet. Now, this thing didn't actually receive any real paint. It got weathered instead, like this. So this is actually all just Tamiya weathering powder, whether it's the different types of rust. So there's dark rust, light rust, soot, and I don't think there was anything else. There's no panel lining. There's no nothing. And so it's just directly over the bare plastic, and I believe this was after, yeah, it had to have been after clear coating it. So I did clear coat the dust, or else it would just be wiping off. And then I did a little bit more work later on, but this is, of course, being glued in place. That's why there's clamps everywhere. And yeah, the super glue, once again, as I mentioned before, it's not a perfectly smooth surface. There's weird ridges. Not all the pieces are lined up exactly right, and the off-cut parts that I had made it really difficult in a few spots. But this is how I created a more realistic looking brick wall, using just something that looked kind of like brick dust, and then, you know, just weathering it up without any real paint being involved at all. And then there it is a little bit later after I added the first bit of diamond plate flooring to the base. And like I said, this is just another sheet of styrene. It's styrene diamond plate. Didn't know it was a thing. I really appreciate it being a thing. Now, one thing I did before I painted it with some silver leaf. Couldn't remember which silver I used. I was going to use gloss aluminum, but it actually is not shiny enough. Silver leaf was perfect for old weathered diamond plate, but I did actually sand down the parts where they would mostly be standing, which you sort of see a flat rubbed away spot right in the middle, where the ridges are just not very prominent. And that's basically what I did. Just hit it with some sandpaper for a little while to rub it down, and then once I painted it all, and I weathered it up after that. Now, this is just the test fit to make sure I have my exact position of where the containment unit is going to go. Now, it stayed actually in this kind of bare white form for a while until I started upgrading it. So this is all within the first 2 days, guys. And actually, now that I've got it in this position, you can see a lot of the tools I'm using and how they're just kind of clustered. So Tamiya Weathering Master stuff is there. The calipers are actually underneath everything. You got knives, files, super glue. I blew through a whole tube of super glue for this. The brushes I use for the weathering markers. Actually, there's a weathering powders. The pen I was using to draw with. The right up in the middle at the top next to the sprue goo is in fact the kind of pinstriping tape, so to speak, that I grabbed for this purpose. And of course the chopper hanging out to the right there. If it's just on the table, that's where it lived. And then it is just being held in place by some sticky tack. This is just to take some teaser photos and send them to people and they're like, hey, look what I'm doing. But once again, you see the devastation of the table, especially the weathering powder that got on my nice, almost perfectly white sheet. And then just another image of it nearly done. I think I did a little bit of weathering around the edges of the brick at this point when I discovered that I could scrape it. And it actually was sort of looking like chipped brick. And then if you look at the diamond plate a little closer, you can see that it's weathered kind of around the edges. And a little cruddy and stuff is built up, stuff like that. So this was just the first day, or second day, I should say, of getting the diorama part done. And I think, but I can't tell by looking at it, if I did the edges or not. Hard to tell. Yeah, okay, so if you look off to the left edge of the brick, you can see like a tiny gap and then the next piece. So I took just a cut off strip edge of the same length thing and then just covered the raw ragged edges. All right, so this was once again just fitting it, but I believe this is this is after I figured out that I wanted to have a little more gap. I didn't want it to sit flat. So I did actually add a little bit of distance or a little bit of space from the wall because I didn't want it to sit exactly flat on the background. And then it's just teaser with the actual dude there. And oh, hold on. I just realized what happened here. So this was, I just realized this is after I added the handle, the little extra detail piece off to the right, and then all of the bolt heads or rivets or whatever they technically are. So you see those. So those are just cut off bits of styrene. I wanted to say tubes, but not tubes, rod. So styrene rod. I can't remember the exact thickness of it, and it's all put away at this point. Mind you, I'm filming this a couple weeks after I built it. But this was just showing off basically how it's going to look in its rough form. And I was going by a picture of the movie, so I've counted and got as close as I could to the position of the actual things. So I think I did a pretty good job there. And they are all glued in place with some good cement. And then once again, that's a picture of it with the actual goo. And then a little close-up of the base so you can see a little bit more of that weathering as he's standing on it. Looks pretty good. And of course, I did weather a little bit around the concrete holes because you got to have it. Okay, so moving on to the next part where I'm making the weapon mounts. So it is more of the styrene for the diamond plate there. And I did thicken it up a little bit at one point This looks like it's double thick, but I think what I ended up doing was just adding a gap. Because the styrene sheet was pretty thin, so I wanted to make sure that it would look like a bit thicker of a piece, so it is doubled up ever so slightly. And then the actual parts that become the backpack mounts or the proton pack mounts, those are actually the chest sections of my Jim and my GBN Gundam. So I actually sacrificed those pieces out of there to make this work. And then the little clippies, 3 of them, the more purple ones, all came from my, oh, what are they? They're from IBO, and my brain is tired. It's kind of late on Sunday, but it's the weapon mounts from the backpacks of those guys that I just cannot think of what they're called off the top of my head. I'll come back to it later. But then the other one off to the left there, the dark gray one, is actually from the Barbatos Lupus Rex, if I remember correctly. So that's just a backpack mount there. I cannot believe I can't remember what that thing is called. It'll come back to me eventually. Okay, so this is just the backpack sitting there, and then the hand that I was sanding to make sure that it would fit around the barrel there. I don't know why I just took a picture of that just for the heck of it. Oh, maybe I'm just showing off the concrete. So you can actually, this is the first good image of the concrete floor, really. So you can see all the bumps and the what looks like crappily poured concrete, honestly. And that's because it was crappily poured concrete paint. So if you really want to actually have a good effective concrete, that's a good way to do it. Just do it really badly, and it'll look like badly poured concrete. And just a wider shot of the same thing. We've already seen basically everything in this pic. Now this is the first kind of test fit of the backpack and the trap to make sure it's going to be in the right position and that it's going to look good. Obviously these weren't glued in place. These are just being held in place by some sticky tack just so I can see what I'm going to do. Ultimately, they are just super glued in place, which had varying degrees of success after this. Luckily, it's covering its own damage, so yay for that. Ah, yes. So this was me needing to make more rivets, and mind you, smaller rivets. So this was the second bit of tubing rod that I bought, and I needed to make a whole lot of very tiny rivets. So I set my distance right there on a chopper and just ran it through 10 times, if I'm looking at it right. Yeah, so this is a close-up of the hinge that I made from both bits of styrene rod. So I wanted it to look like it actually still had the hinge that it was gonna need. And I think it came out pretty good, considering that I had to really very precisely cut these things and kind of glue them in place without screwing up, which was not easy. And the ultimate thing is Thomas actually thought the door could open. So I guess ultimately I did a good job. But this also gives you a closer look at how the rivets are attached and things like that. And you can see some of the really nasty gluing areas, which, by the way, guys, as I discovered when I went to go prime and paint this thing, if you still have some of that thin cement on the surface, paint doesn't like to stick to that. So make sure that you sand any areas that still have some exposed cement. Now this was the next upgrade, so I needed to build the where the wires basically go, where the ribbon cable is going to run from the top of the unit to the side conduit, I guess if that's what you want to call it. So I actually just measured out a couple pieces of styrene, roughly the same size, except I cut one a little bit thinner once they were in place. But these are just stuck on with some thin cement. And then that's where it started to get difficult, because the wires and stuff is not the easiest thing in the world to do. Now this is also where I decided to go ahead and glue the extra spacers on the back so that I could give it that little distance away from the actual metallic wall. No biggie here, just off random cuts and make sure they were in the parts that were going to need the most support. At this point, you can see that I'm just sitting there in my shorts. But if we zoom in a little bit, you can see the much smaller rivets that are now on the upper plates. That's what I was cutting out all those extra bits for. Now that looks like 8 of them, so I'm guessing I only cut 8, and I didn't count right on the last one. And then the two little cables that are supposed to go from the rainbow wire into that. So I cut off two extra little parts of the wire, didn't need all of them. And then the actual ends of the conduit, or kind of the coax connectors, more or less, you can see at the end there, that's the same styrene rod. I just drilled out a hole, and that was just, actually it was too big for the wire, but I filled it in with sprue goo, and then eventually super glue, because sprue goo was not technically drying. If you don't have it against actual styrene, it has a hard time actually drying. But I did the same thing at both ends eventually, and at the bottom left of this picture you can see the other little power box controller thingy. I don't actually know what it does, being made. You can see the little knobs sticking off of it. Now this is actually making the rainbow cable, so you do have to enclose at least one end of the thing for it to work. So just a couple off-cut bits of styrene there, a little bit longer, a little bit wider than the wires are actually going to be. Now I did something different with this one than I did with the backpack. With the backpack, it was all twisted together and then super glued, so that the super glue would sort of bind all the wires together. In this case, I needed them to be actually spaced out and, you know, more stranded, more flat. So I did fill it in with sprue goo in between, so it would fill in the gaps, and sort of, once it actually bonded to the styrene on either side, it was pretty strong, but I did end up having to use a little bit of super glue to cap off each side, because the wires did want to slide out. So that was one problem. But if you ever needed to make your own, like, rainbow connectors here, or rainbow wires, or whatever you want to call it, this is a good way to do it. It's basically the same thing I did, like I said, on the proton pack, but without twisting the wires. Now this was skipping ahead quite a bit. So the weapon holding mounts are done and painted at this point, and are all glued in place. And the rainbow connectors and all that are done and also in place. So I went ahead and glued the one end to where it was going to terminate at. And then you see the same thing where the wires are coming out the other side and going up to the other little weird power box or control box. Now, for the actual bend in the wires where they flip over 90 degrees, that was very not easy. In fact, trying to make sure that I had the right length of wire, had the bend in the exact right place, in the hole where the wires terminate into the actual containment unit, and it is just a hole, or a slot rather, that took a whole lot of time to figure out that exact spacing so that it would fit, and that the other part wasn't going to be very wonky and sticking out way further than it needed to. That actually took me quite a long time. And to actually bend the wires that way, I was using my tweezers, and I would actually held them at a 45-degree angle, and then just bent it over several times till I got it in the exact right position, and just held it until it was good. And then I would put it in the slot, and then glued the other end in place, and then just held it till it was done. And then finally, once it held in place, it was really good. It was a much better lighted and actually closer version of the same thing. So you can see a little bit more what's going on. That's what happens when you turn your lights on. And a zoom in shot of how I did the ribbon cable. Ah, there we go, ribbon cable. That's the word I wanted, not rainbow cable. May as well just actually intertwine that. Actually, in this close-up shot, you can see the two holes drilled for the heavier cable that's coming later, and you can also see the super glue that's building up the kind of coax connections at the end, because the wires wanted to come out. Now, while they were in fact glued on each end with some normal cement, the wires themselves were not staying in the conduit, so I ended up actually just having to super glue it, and that just became part of it. Now moving on back to the containment unit, making it look a little bit better. Every one of those rivets needed to be rounded off because they are not squared off. So I actually took my Dremel tool with the kind of conical polishing or grinding end, and then just let it actually use its own grip and just freehanded its way around each one of those rivets. This took quite some time just to round them off and make sure they look good. And this is just the rough pass. Obviously, I went back later, cleaned them up a little bit. But this is also the side I wanted to talk about earlier that is not squared up and is very roughly done. So if you look, the curved edge, all that stuff, and when it meets up into the corner, it is actually some of the worst part of the construction of this thing. Regardless of sanding or filling, it just was not going to cooperate and look good, honestly. But I think ultimately, the way that the curvature of the surface came out was worth it, even though it took a few passes to get right. And this is actually, once it is in full primer, I did mask off my ribbon cable so that it wouldn't get covered in paint, because definitely don't want to have to just strip that of anything, because that would have been a real big pain in the butt. And of course, just using normal Tamiya ultrafine primer, superfine, ultra thin, whatever you want to call it, because that's all I've got. And because this is going to be painted red, we definitely wanted it to have a white base so that it's going to stand out. And as it's once again just stuck on that same box that I was using as a painting bit. But as you guys can tell, it's dark outside, and I did actually do this part at night. So this is near the end of the third day of working on this. Mind you, I started this on a Wednesday, and I finished it on Saturday. Definitely one of the craziest thrashes I've ever had. Now this is, of course, throwing down a different coat, and I wanted to darken it up a little bit, so I hit everything with some gray. Just, I don't know which one it is offhand. It does, not gunmetal, gunship maybe. I can't remember. But I wanted it to have some dark edges around things like that because of the way this is paneled. It would have almost an edge shading effect, which it eventually did have. So, the first couple coats of red, it is incredibly red. Like very stark, very red. I don't think it's gloss red. I can't remember exactly which red. Hopefully I'll flash it on the screen here. But yeah, so no, I did not paint it inside. I brought it inside to set after the first coat or so. And I was laying it on a little thick, if I'm honest. But the weather was changing right and left. And you see, it's still looking pretty good, even in the raw red colors. So while that was all kind of chilling off to the side, mind you, you can see at this point, I bought a metal ruler. And I had used it at this point. It's nice cutting straight edge and things like that. And, well, it's pretty good. But what I wanted to show off here is the power conduits and or sewer cables that will be running how they get power. In almost every aspect of, if you look at it online, if you look at the pictures, if you look at any toy representations of the Ecto Containment unit, you see that the power wires just run off and up. They don't really go anywhere. There's nothing above them. So obviously I wanted to have something up there. So I said, it's just kind of supposed to be like a New York City sewer. They're going to have big old conduit, big old power pipes and sewer pipes together. So I already had this tubing that was bought for another project and decided that, you know what, this is perfect for this. I built the junction box out of 3 small square tubings. Like I actually bought some square tubings. I was thinking about adding some vertical studs or supports on the wall because they are actually there, but this section of wall is too short for it to be there. So I actually built a box around those just so I had inner structure. I don't know, I just really wanted to use the thing I bought. And then built it up and had a cover plate put on there, once again making some more rivets. And then where the tubes or the pipe came into said junction box, I actually used thin strip styrene to add just the kind of connector base. That's actually not part of the pipe. That's actually just styrene piece. So you can see the straps that have not been attached yet. It's the exact same styrene strips, which are really handy when you want to do some nice little straight edges. However, they seem to get a little bit brittle when you try to make them go around things because it is super thin. And then once you actually apply the cement, they get a little bit weaker. So unfortunately, I didn't catch things as I went along here, and actually I guessed. I measured to a degree of where the box should end up. It ended up being a little bit further towards the center than it should have been. It should have been a few more mil to the left of itself. Ultimately, it looks fine. But this is just the bare construction and then just a slightly better picture of it from a different angle because white on white is kind of hard to see. And then fitting it in place once the construction was done and seeing where everybody was going to line up. Now you can see there, the little red power box that we still don't know what it does is way too close to that, and it should actually be off a little bit further. So that was one thing that was hard to judge without everything being already done. But at this point, everybody's kind of connected and where they're going to go. Also, you can see here that Thomas's trap is hung up in his place where it's supposed to be. But this was kind of a dry test fit to see where everybody was going to end up. And you can see the tools on the desk have gotten a bit more minor. And also, I'm still wearing the same shorts. Alright, so once again, everybody's sort of dry fit. I don't think I had attached it at this point, but I can't recall because it might still be held in place by some sticky tack, but I did eventually, of course, add some screws that would hold it in place. I actually drilled from the backside all the way through and then added the screws. Oh, here we go. That's exactly what I was doing. So this is what happens when I don't look ahead. So you can see that I have the upper screw hole and the bottom one in there, and those are actually the same screws that you use for the action bases. So any of the action base uprights, if you build them, you know, you have plenty of screws left over if you don't actually build the entire thing. So there you go. That's exactly what I use for that. I just use my pin vise, got the size almost exactly the right thickness of the bolt, drilled all the way through the backing plate, and made it happen. At this point, I had done the primer coat real quick and then added a base coat of kind of the reddish brown color that I use to simulate rust. And this is actually the pipe in the inside now of the same base that I was spray painting on. You can see a little bit of red paint and stuff like that rolling around, but this is after just a brown coat so that it'll have some rust effect because it's an underground sewer pipe. Odds are it's going to get rusty. And this is painting on a little bit of the details and stuff from this guy. And you can see that I've painted the knobs black, and I've added the end of the ribbon cable is also black. The coax cables are now, or coax connectors are now gold, or actually brass if we're honest. And then the wires got painted black as well, along with the kind of screws or bolts or whatever you want to call them that are on the little power box. Those are black. Don't ask me why. They are on the actual prop. I'm going by the actual reference to the best of my ability. And what I'm getting ready for here, as you can see this towel on a plate, is I'm starting to do the water slides. In fact, you can see the water slides right there above it, getting ready to add on my warning labels. So this is nearly complete. So this is all of the water slides put on there, some silver paint added on for the buttons, the different water slides put in place, and actually I had already begun weathering over them with a little bit of weathering powder and stuff like that. Now, a little bit after this, I did clear coat it once it was finally all done, all the details painted on, stuff like that. And then I did also add the pinstriping at this point, which was too thick. If I'm honest, it's a little bit thicker than it should be. It should be a pretty thin white line. But any thinner, and I think it would have been really hard to get a straight line out of it. I was trying to cut it to length and then put it in place. Trying to do that with a much thinner piece probably would have been a little bit difficult. Now, I did weather around the edges, kind of more crud building up, and things like that. So, all right, back to the pipe. This is after adding the black, or the matte black coat. I thought I got a picture of it masking off. I used my same masking techniques of both salt and toothpaste. Gave it a much rougher finish, as you can see. But I had the same problem that I had when I was doing my practice runs. The finer salt actually didn't get out of the paint. The paint dried too quickly and a little too thick. The coats were a little too thick, so it didn't work out. But it still looks like a good rusty, cruddy pipe. Added a few more bits. I did mask off to get the red cover plate there, so you could tell that, you know, these not quite Ghostbusters did this, and then added the same warning label that I had on the other one, and then dry brushed and all kinds of other weathering on top of it. I think it came out really nice. And then this is the almost complete shot, if not actual complete shot. So weathering up along the sides, getting all kinds of crud. Basically, to do that, I actually took some of the weathering powder, added some water to it, and then let it kind of drip into place, kind of blot just kind of splatted it or blopped it in place. Same thing around the rivets going down the front. I really wanted it to collect around those in a downward fashion, so it's basically how it worked out. And then more shots of the pipe, even dirtier. And then this is the first picture of it actually being complete. At this point, everything is held on exactly as it should be. Screw holes are in place, and everybody's good to go. So this is about as finished as it got. And honestly, this entire project was completely random, was not planned, and then just pulled it off in 4 days because I needed it by Sunday. So by Saturday night, I finally kind of finished this. Let's see, what is the time code on it? It looks like 5 p.m. if I had to guess. Or almost 6 p.m. it looks like. But yeah, so I was really working on this, and then just more pictures of it now, fully loaded with the equipment. Oh, and the pipes. Hold on. Yeah, that's right. That was not the complete photo because I had not put the silver pipes on. So the silver wires were actually some of the hardest thing to do because I could not get the kink right. I could not get the distance right. And it actually took several passes to do that. And these were just the same black wire, just hit with silver leaf, and or maybe that one was the gloss aluminum, and then hit with the dulling clear coat. So they looked still shiny, but the paint wouldn't go away, considering that I needed to run it into holes and bend it into shape. And you can see here it's a little bit wonky. And this is after I finally finished the lights. Unfortunately, I didn't take any pictures as I was building the lights because I was really frustrated and running out of time. Okay, so this is much later in the day. This is about 2.5 hours later of working on the lights. So I actually did find some red and green runner, or red and green clear runner, cut those off. As I mentioned in the review, or one of them, they came from the Dark Matter Exia and the Amazing Exia because they share the exact same runner design. Both the red and the green came from those things, and then the parts that actually stick out from the wall, those came from the exact same runners. They're just kind of a 90-degree bend, but it's a harsher bend, whereas most of the corners are curvy. And then the actual tops of the lights are just some vernier bits that I cut off and shaped. So there was no way I could find the proper barn light style lights. I looked, could not find miniature versions of them to get a closer replication, but actually using real Gunpla parts on a project like this, I'm not going to complain. It just took me way too long to make these lights happen. And I did actually round it off myself with using the same exact method that I did for the rivets. And then here's the final shots, actually on my set with the weird black reflective panel. I had it out for some reason, so I threw it out there just to get some nice shots of it. In fact, even at this point, I need to get more pictures of it to put up on the interwebs so that people can see it. But basically, this is going to be the end of this build log. Guys, like I said, normally I would have videoed and stuff like that, but because I was under a time crunch already, I spent all of my time building. I actually gave up a good 2.5 hours or so on Wednesday to run down to G&G to go pick up the diamond plate, the paint, the brick, all that stuff. So the fact that I got the whole background and all of that built in the second day after going and doing that shopping was pretty impressive. I really did. I shocked myself. I impressed myself with this because it was nothing I planned on doing and something I figured out what I was doing as I was going. And it's a good thing to be able to surprise yourself. I think I started with the proton pack. I was happy with the results, and then I just kept upping the game. When I built the trap, I was really, really excited because I think that's probably one of the best things I've ever built, especially on a small scale, because it's almost perfect for what it is. And then I built this thing after it, where some of the details are sloppy, like the pinstripes are the things that bother me the most. So if I can actually replace the pinstripes down the line, that'll be the thing I do. The rest of it, I'm very much happy with. The brick wall and stuff like that, I could get rid of it down the line if we decide to expand on this project. Obviously, I just built it to a size. There was nothing very specific I was doing with it. And if I wanted to add more to say like the piping and stuff like that, I definitely could. But as it goes, just nice little diorama, which I still don't know where I'm going to set it up, to be totally honest. There's not a ton of room left on my custom shelf as it is. And sadly, it was meant for mine and Rodimus's builds to be stationed on, but he wanted to hold on to his at his work. So unfortunately, we don't get to play that game. But if for some reason I decide to build another one, I could totally do that, and we'll have fun there. But guys, if you like this build log, let me know what you think down below, because honestly, I don't think a lot of people stuck around long enough in the real review to see this, because I got no comments about it. So that's why I wanted to do this separate build log, because I forgot to. I mean, I logged it in pictures, but I forgot to include it in the overall build log for the guard frame or the buster frame. So, but here you go, guys. This was my custom ecto containment unit from the kind of weird GBN Glitchbusters, that thing that we came up with. Now, surprisingly, I don't know that this project is completely done. We found a good stopping place, but I feel that Rodimus has been inspired by my work and seems to want to continue to do other things with it. So we'll see what happens in the future. But like I said, leave me a like, leave me a comment. Go ahead and subscribe if you are new to the channel. And if you have any other ideas in the future, if there's any other critiques that you could give to help with certain techniques and things like that, by all means. There is one thing I want to do to help make my boxes a little bit better, keep my corners and stuff better, keep my things plumb. I need to get some 1, 2, 3 blocks. I forgot to do it the other day when I was actually out shopping, because I was going to see where they were available. So I need to get a couple 2-packs of those. I know they have them on Amazon, stuff like that. That would have really been a big help, especially with making boxes like this. So, but I will catch you guys on the next review or unboxing or whatever it is that's coming up, because from here on out to the rest of the year, things are going to be a little bit different. There's going to be more build logs, less Gunpla, because frankly, I burned out on Gunpla after building this thing, and I've got some other fun projects that I'm going to be working on, some big stuff that I've been wanting to do for quite some time. So I'll catch you next time. Remember, as always, to keep on building.